Here. Hello, welcome back to Debate Hub. You will notice that we are a little bit of a mess right now, but it's okay. It's fine. We got a workaround. Apparently, VMix decided it wanted to just, I don't know, shit the bed or something. It's fine. Chris is with me, but Chris is Chesh, and I am Chris. Welcome! How are you after that clusterfuck? Wait 1 second. I might need to change something. I realize there might be one more setting that I need to adjust. Go Google Chrome, change output device, cable input. Cable input, audio, on, go.
Go. Hello.
Yes,
Yay.
I'm a technical god.
Oh, you are amazing.
Thanks.
The YouTube got us here.
Yes,
Connection queen.
awesome sauce. Okay, listen, it worked. All that matters is that we did it. We had a problem. We approached the problem calm and logically,
Right.
and we screamed at the computer until it worked.
You stayed calm. Yes.
So, besides that little kerfuffle, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine.
Last time we were here, we were a little bit more optimistic.
Yeah, and I still am. It just depends on what time frame you want to talk about.
Fair. That's fair. Do you want to tell the people who you are real quick, just in case for new people?
Hey everybody. So my name is Chris Shelton. I'm a guy, got a YouTube channel. My big historical claim to fame is that I grew up in a cult and I got myself out of it. And I've been talking about cults for about 11 years or something now, since I got out. And I help people recover from cults. I talk about the anatomy of cults and coercion and coercive control. And I wrote a book about Scientology, and I'm writing a book about cult recovery right now. And it's kind of my thing, sort of psych and group psychology of that stuff. And somehow in the last 10 years, I have found that information to be highly relevant outside of just understanding, pipsqueak cults like Scientology.
I like
So
that Scientology is now considered a pipsqueak cult.
I know, right?
It's a bit crazy.
It is. I know, and it's wild, but it always and the funny thing is it's always had this oversized public perception because of the celebrities, right? Tom Cruise, John Travolta,
Yeah.
sort of thing. And it speaks a lot to the power of celebrity in our world that such a tiny little group can have such an oversized impact
Oh
just
yeah.
because of a couple of its key members, and that's the cult world.
Yeah, sometimes just the amount of money you can shove into something and overinflate it. Tesla stock.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so sad.
Very sad indeed. I have been watching that the last couple weeks, actually. It's really imploding, isn't it?
Oh my god. What a relevant time to be talking about Maga as a cult and how it operates. So, we should probably start off with like how how do you define a cult in a way that it makes sense that Maga would be included?
Well, so yeah, the thing about the political movements or ideological movements is you got to be clear that when you start throwing the word cult around, you're talking about a very specific set of things, right? It's characteristics, actions, structure. There's things that go into making a cult a cult. And so you cannot look at any political movement or ideological movement and say, well, the entire thing is a cult, because generally that's not true. Not all libs are a cult. Not all progressives are a cult. Not all conservatives are a cult. And not all of MAGA is a cult. But I think all of us have seen the pictures or have seen or heard news footage. And certainly you heard about January 6th, to the point where that there are a subset of this group of Trump supporters. If you took all the people in the world and said, okay, here's all the Trump supporters, a slice of them are wrapped up in a personal emotional investment in Donald Trump and the MAGA movement that is unhealthy and I will say extreme, pushes them into an extreme headspace. And that extremism is the same kind of extremism that we see when we talk about Scientologists or Moonies or Mormons or Nexium survivors, right? Like we're talking about a level of commitment and emotional giving over of their emotional needs to somebody else.
So like a surrender of like personal power, and
exactly.
they just take that individuality, and they take their personalities, and they just give those over. They surrender those over. They sell them for not having to worry about it. Which, I kind of I can respect that. I can understand being just tired and exhausted and everything sucks, and being like, this person is telling me that they're going to fix everything and tell me exactly what to do to get my life to be exactly where I want it to be, and being convinced by that, because like, I mean, who doesn't want their life to be easier, right? Why wouldn't you want that?
Well, yeah, exactly. And it's actually, the MAGA, the folks that put Donald Trump in power don't just want a nicer life. They're I mean, they kind of gave up on the system, and the system kind of gave up on them.
And now they're like, please, system, help us.
Now the response, the lens that I see this through is that a whole bunch of disenfranchised Americans got really, really, really upset about the fact that, about a lot of things, some of them right, some of them wrong. And a lot of it has to do with economics. And you're not going to find a lot of people in the psych and social world talking about economics, but it has a lot to do with why we're at where we're at. So,
yeah,
and with the psychology of it, So I see a group of people who feel like who cave up, and when people give up and don't have hope in their future, they can be counted upon to do anything.
Self-destructive, like an animal in a corner.
Yeah, they get that's very true. And a lot of us have been feeling more and more and more like that for decades. My entire life, it's been a slow, boiling water frog thing in terms of economic disenfranchisement, right? Big words, but losing your money doesn't go as far. And right. And a lot of people have been feeling those sort of pinchers closing in on them. Well, there's a group of folks in the United States who felt that long before we did, and gave up, right? And Trump comes along, and the Republicans aren't servicing these people, the Dems aren't servicing these people, they're ignoring these people for the most part. Well, people don't like to be ignored.
This is true. I think that there's something to be said for, if there's a very, very big difference between the economy within your country on a local basis and like on a state to statewide scope, and geopolitics. People do not understand a lot of the terms they're complaining about. So, like, debt. Debt is a thing and a tool that you can use when you're talking about economics. For an individual, you probably and likely don't want to be in debt unless under certain circumstances.
Sure.
Those certain circumstances being a house, a car. That's about it. A credit card that you're trying to like up your points with, or whatever, your credit score. But otherwise, people talk about debt in their personal lives, and then they apply that understanding of what debt is to wider economics, and that is just not how economics works. It just is not how it works.
No. And that's the same way, in the same way that people misunderstand or misapply the idea that if you know how to run a business, then you'll have some idea of how to do politics or run a government. And
Yeah,
these,
conflating government and business because there's economics involved, as if every single business utilizes wider economics, which they don't necessarily.
well, it's yeah. I mean, as one of a laundry list of reasons why these things are different from one another, but are often crunched together and made out as though they should be the same,
Yeah,
especially when you get, speech like rhetoric, out of government officials about balancing the budget. And it should be, like, it's not like politicians haven't used this messaging to their own personal advantage, but ultimately to our collective disadvantage because we don't understand. People end up walking away thinking, oh, yeah, we got to get a businessman in there and he's going to run it like a business and it's going to be very efficient and it's going to be so much better. And sure enough, government does tend to collect inefficiency and bureaucracy to itself in an alarming way.
yeah,
And these things should be dealt with. But that's where the analogy ends, to say, we're going to run it on a balance sheet with profit loss, with these concepts of investiture and, citizens are consumers. Citizens are not consumers. And this is where you're really taking that analogy, not you
yeah.
personally, but, where that analogy just goes off a cliff so quickly. And very few people seem to think that thought through. They stop at the point of efficiency and go, well, that makes sense. And then they don't think about it any further than that,
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said about, like, when you do messaging, when you're a communicator, when it's your job to take a concept and express it to the largest, like a large number of Americans or any group. It doesn't have to be Americans. We're talking about Maga specifically today, so, be offended, I guess. But it applies across the board. If you are trying, it makes sense to utilize language that they will understand to get a concept across, but there can be a very easy mistake to make that can get you kicked in the ass by it's going to come back and bite you when they now completely have misapplied what you've said. If you want a good example of this in science, calling DNA a code,
Sure.
right? Where people immediately take that and go, "Oh, a code, so it needs a programmer." It's like, no, it's not that kind of. No, it's. I was just using a term you would understand. So saying like, "Oh, we're trying to balance the budget," doesn't mean zero debt. But people
No.
think balancing a budget means zero debt. I don't know if you've ever balanced an equation before in your life, but the answer is 1 to 1, not 1 to 0. That's not how it works.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's these concepts, it's these terms that get used as, I don't want to call it shorthand because it is necessary in communication. But if you're not very, very careful, something can really grow its own legs and just take off.
Well, I think what it also does is helps show us how certain people, and certainly, we can talk about like Elon Musk or something. He's a great example, actually, maybe a prime example of someone who has been described accurately as someone who is hyper intelligent, extremely intelligent, and able and capable in a very narrow space. Like most of us, we specialize. We have one thing or a couple things that we're really good at,
Mhm.
that we legit have talent or skill or genius or whatever in. But the assumption that's made, especially it seems the more money you get or the more influence or power you get, this assumption that gets made by people and by the individuals themselves is, because I'm so good at this and I'm so well known for this and so well appreciated for this, I must have that same level of insight and ability in all these other areas too.
Mhm.
And they don't,
Yeah.
you know,
I
and
honestly think you're being very generous in your assessment.
I'm trying to point out,
Yeah.
that there's, it's not that Musk is the complete moron across the boards. He's
He has to
a,
be smart at something, right?
but he's also incredibly disordered. He's an incredibly disordered mind. And
He's definitely gotten worse over the
Oh, very much worse, because he has been corrupted by his own corruption. He's been, it's an exponential sort of escalation with him,
Yeah.
and the more power, in other words, the more influence he's gotten, the more it's gone to his head, and the more it has fed a machine within his head that is a very disordered machine. You know, and he doesn't deal with things well. He has a childlike understanding of politics, for example.
Yeah,
But
I would even argue that I think he might have a childlike understanding of economics, because like he seems to think that if he's richer, the country is richer, and like kind of, but not really.
well, you'll find that morality pretty steady across the 1%, right? They are all very, very sure that the rest of us need them desperately. That's their position, of course, and they would need to have that position because they are people who are living in very rarefied air.
In current times, as a Canadian in the room, having America throwing its weight around, thinking that it's very, very, very important to everybody, has been very felt in our direction recently.
I know, and it sucks. It really does. Because it's not, because there is this actually kind of brings to mind at least a point for me that I think that I wanted to make today. I think is important, is that when people feel economically or politically disenfranchised, when they feel that their voice no longer important or no longer matters, it doesn't matter how much money or how well off they are or how things are in the reality of the situation. If they feel that way, or they are made to feel that way over an extended period of time, then they're going to become unpredictable, because they don't think that doing the predictable, usual, normal things are working for them. Their life is a mess, or they don't have any political power. They have no influence. They have no ability to change anything. That's when everything starts falling apart, and people start imagining that they need to go to extreme measures in order to get the change they want, because all the usual stuff isn't working. And the Trump cult, and there is a cult of personality around this man, and that cult specifically is all about blowing everything up because it just doesn't work anymore.
I think that's why the shift in the rhetoric that you're seeing from the Trump administration is going to work. So he initially ran on, one of the things is economics. In his first term, one of the things he was obsessed with how well the stock market was doing, right? And he promised eggs going down on the first day. And what you're seeing is his administration now telling people to buy chickens because that's not going to change, and that the crash that's going on right now is actually a transition period to get out of Biden economics into Trump economics. And I think people who are already on board with this are going to believe it and agree that it's actually a good thing, because they're like, no, we need you to burn down the establishment that exists, and this is part of that process, even though that's not what was promised.
Well, exactly. I mean, promises are always made that can't be delivered on during presidential campaigns, and bringing down the price of eggs
that should be illegal.
Well, okay. But it isn't. And so, and around the world, this will continue to be a thing.
Politicians lying should actually be a punishable offense.
Yeah, that's not gonna fly.
Yeah, I know, but I'm not wrong.
You're not wrong. But let me say that, that there's something you just said that I think plays on a very, very key misunderstanding of a wide swath of the population, certainly in the US, I think in most Western nations, which is the relationship of the stock market to our economic health. And also, I don't know if you were paying attention or saw during the election cycle when Kamala was running against Trump just now, it was her election to lose, and they lost badly because the Dems screwed it up so bad. But one of the and this rhetoric around the economy was one of the key messaging gaffes. They really screwed this up bad because they kept saying, and it kept being reported, how great the economy was doing and how inflation was down and things were better and everything was going better. In the face of people not able to not only afford eggs because of, you know, bird swine flu, whatever, but also just generally, just for years and years and years now. The stock market doesn't reflect the health of our economy or the general spending habits of American public. And it reflects value of corporations that are being invested in as a gambling activity. And yet people like Trump pay a lot of attention to the stock market because that's where they're making their pennies from, that's not where we're making our pennies from. And so there's a big disconnect between the economists reporting on inflation being down while prices are outrageous, and there's a disconnect between the stock market doing good or doing bad, and that's supposed to be some kind of reflection of how we're doing as regular.
It's like a weird conflation of a bunch of different concepts that aren't even applicable to each other just because they use similar words and they're part of the same capitalist system that America is currently utilizing. Which, by the way, there's more than one capitalist system. You can set up capitalism in different ways. You don't have to do it the way America's doing it, but you know.
Correct.
But here's the thing, right? The way you get, I think we can agree that particularly like in your extreme MAGA, you've got cult behaviors, you've got dear leader, you've got basically worshiping Trump, that there've been claims that he's been sent by God. You've got the disregarding anything actually going on and just say, he says one thing 5 minutes ago, says the opposite thing just now, and they're just going to go along with whatever the current thing he's saying is. So, like, for example, the agreement between Mexico, Canada, America is the worst deal. Who even signed this deal? You did? You signed that deal. What are you talking about? But so where do you think is going to be the line? Because I'm seeing a lot of the leopards ate my face, but it is clearly not enough yet. I don't know.
No, and it's not how this is going to change. The cult members are cult members for a reason, right? They invest of themselves, and Trump's cult is pretty out there. They're pretty extreme, but the cult people, you have to understand, are actually a minority that hold very little actual power outside of the line to the guru, right? There are people who have been pardoned, for example, for crimes like the J6 guys. That's something that they have gotten as a result of following Trump and being loyal to him.
He let out all of the prisoners and the violent people into the country? Weird.
Yeah, exactly.
That thing that he ran saying that that's what the foreigners were doing.
I know. Yeah, the hypocrisy really does know no bounds. But it's important to understand that from within the side,
they're not going to view it that way.
They love him.
Yeah.
And they have no reason right now to not love him. Yep. Because the downstream effects of the things that the administration is implementing right now have not yet begun to bite at all in any meaningful way. There's just a bunch of rhetoric and mostly on the internet left-wing, anti-Trump circles about how bad all of this is going to be. And some of it is absolutely nailing it, and others is the usual hyperbole and, America's going to end tomorrow and all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think there's like a handful of people that are getting hit with this really, really fast, particularly government workers. But I think there are a handful of government workers that are MAGA, but they're going to do one of two things. They're either going to leopards ate my face it, or they're going to say, no, this is necessary. I'm martyring for dear leader.
Well, exactly. And somebody made a point that was really important to understand about people in the MAGA cult. And we are only, again, I'm going to clarify, we're talking about a slice of a slice here when we're talking about the cult members, right?
Right.
you have a group of people who are so enraptured by their guru, by their dear leader, that economic self-interest is no longer what is incentivizing their behavior. It's not what's driving them. We ask the question all the time, why do they vote against their best self-interest? Why are they voting against themselves? Well, they gave up on voting being something that was going to change their life in a meaningful, positive way a couple decades ago. Like that's like it wasn't Trump came and suddenly they were, good little conservatives. They had given up on them too. That's why Trump could stand on a stage a few years ago with 14 or 16 or whatever, seasoned GOP politicians and wipe the floor with them. It wasn't like these people had any faith in the right-wing politicians either. That's why Trump is this messianic figure to them, right? It's because he's not a left or a right. He's above all that, right? Whether he's
that's something really interesting that's going on in Canada right now. Our Liberal Party, Mark Carney, is running as an outsider, right? Mm-hmm. He's currently he's the leader of the Liberal Party now, but he's running as an outsider. He's not a career politician. He's not even technically a businessman. He ran banks, which are not running a bank, to be clear, is not the same as running a private business. Because we're talking about he ran the Bank of England. We're talking about the Bank of Canada, which is just it just runs conceptually differently. It's not about running profit in the same way and dealing with profit margins in the same way. It still exists, but the regulations and yada, yada, yada is a whole spiel of things. But you have this guy who is coming in as this idea that we're actually going to get some kind of change to our politics, which is also something that Canadians want. So are we going to see Carney, and are we going to see Carney in a way where he gets these fervent, like almost like a counterbalance, like the other way, where we've got like a Trump but liberal?
Oh yeah, sure. Maybe. Well, yeah, and in fact, if the people on the political left want to actually, finally get around to reading the writing on the wall, then they might notice that we're sort of in a proto-authoritarian populist phase are all over the world right now. And the world is changing, right? That whole world order thing. And and the anxiety and the economic unrest of a lot of people isn't just in the United States. It's in Canada, it's in Mexico, it's in England, it's in Europe. The wage disparity between the 1% and the working class is not an American phenomenon. It's this gap. Yeah. It's everywhere, and because the 1% are multinational, they don't pay attention to, they're not patriots. It's not the American billionaires; it's billionaires. So we all have this common problem with these people, but we don't look globally or think globally that way. We think and tend to act locally. So we look at or blame local level, country level, city level, state level issues for, our problems. And we don't necessarily see the bigger picture that's kind of uniting us all. And that's why these cult things develop. That's why people get so extreme about this stuff and hyper focused on what they do know and can see and can pay attention to. And that's how you get a Trump, right?
Well, and we've talked before about sort of the attention market and how problematic that can be. And I think it's very easy to take advantage of it. Again, you've got a guy, a foreigner, who moved in, got a citizenship in America, then spent $44 billion to control the biggest social media site in the country, and he got the money from Saudi Arabia. Like, to do it. And the people who are Maga are bitching and whining and moaning about election interference and foreign entities, and it's just like,
It's been a real interesting, disturbing time to watch propaganda play out as propaganda on every single front.
Mhm.
If you're paying attention, it's happening, all over. And the social media aspect of this, of course, is, I'm a psych guy. I pay attention to psych stuff. So, I talk in things like ways, right? There are other ways of framing this stuff or talking about this stuff. You can talk about the corruption or downfall of corporate media. You could talk about journalism, as, the lack of integrity in journalism and the sort of acidic, corrosive, influence of social media on that.
Capitalism.
Big conversations to be had about this stuff. But from the cult perspective, I keep returning to the theme of, look, economic disparity causes anxiety and stress, because if you can't feed your kids, then you're going to freak out. And people do freak out. And they've been freaking out for a couple generations now.
It's a reasonable thing to freak out about.
Well, it is. And then you pile on top of that the short attention span conditioning of what social media has sort of created in us, where people can't have or don't want to engage in long conversation or deep understandings of things. They want and are conditioned to want headlines only, short, in 145 characters, or it's not worth knowing. Yeah. And you can't understand certain issues just with that approach. You just can't.
Propaganda very much benefits us off the gift gallop.
Well, yeah. And so there's this sort of dumbing down effect that you get, not because people are becoming stupider, but because their attention span is becoming less and less. And it doesn't matter how much smarts you have in
the amount of time that you're allotted to spend on anything is so small that you can't possibly grasp the scenario. I'm watching people say things to me like, oh, well, why is America shouldn't be in wars in foreign places anyway? And I'm just like, what? What are you talking? Does that mean that America should only be fighting wars on its own soil? Like, nobody's attacking you. What are you talking about?
Well, exactly.
It makes no sense.
Well, there's this very big isolationist push right now, and that's sort of half the Trump camp, right? There's a couple different there's varying, there's no monolithic thing here, and this is one of the reasons why it's important to understand that the cult of Trump is just a part of this picture. Mm-hmm. If you try to overgeneralize the entire picture into a cult, you will fail. You'll misunderstand what's going on, and things are going to stay confusing for you. So I really want to drive that point home to the audience today, that it's a slice of a slice, right? So the cult, and you can look at the cult guys and you can predict what they're going to do because they're cultists, right? And the behavior is going to be grandiose and exaggerated and hyperbolic. And
Trump is predictable. Elon is somewhat predictable, but he's also a little bit of a weirdo.
Well, Trump, I don't know that Trump and Musk are predictable. I was talking about their followers, but Elon is somebody. I mean, nobody predicted Doge. Nobody saw this coming a year ago.
Well, they said they were going to do it. They just didn't call it that.
Yeah, I don't think these guys are quite as. I wouldn't call them predictable. I would, especially as disordered as Elon's mind is, and Trump is. Trump is predictable to the degree that that any relationship or situation he's going to go into, what you do know is he's going to see and navigate that for as much personal gain as he can get out of it. That's you can predict that. Yeah. You can't actually predict even that much out of Musk, because his value set is so scattered.
Yeah.
All over the place, and his agenda is not clear even to himself, because it changes constantly based on his reactionary emotional state, and his emotions are all over the place, and he's easily triggered. And when you're dealing with somebody who has an awful lot of power and who has that many triggers that are that
fragile,
that fragile, unpredictability becomes a very big problem. And that's one of the problems that Musk has been having with people around him for quite some time now,
Yeah.
especially when we talk about Tesla. The only reason Tesla is still around, as far as I can tell, is because of carbon credit income. And he packed the board of the Tesla Corporation with his brother and other sycophants.
Yeah.
Any other board, I think, at this point would have gotten rid of him by now for all of his antics.
Yeah.
But they're not going to.
No.
So,
yeah, and the world response to it has been very interesting. I don't know. We'll see what happens. There's a lot going on. I would not be surprised to see Elon and his companies kicked off the world stage in any capacity.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised to see it. I expect to see Twitter getting banned in places for a lot of different reasons. There's like plenty of laws that are in place about speech and protected speech and yada 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 that will have Twitter removed pretty fucking fast as soon as they want it to be gone.
Sure.
There's one thing that I'm finding interesting is I don't know if I'm right about this, so correct me if you think I'm wrong here. I'm gonna spit theory craft a little bit here. There seems to be this idea in America that has persisted for a very, very long time that America is at the top of the pile, that America is leading the world, that America is very, very important on this world stage, and I don't disagree with that. But there seems to have been a shift, and I don't know how fast or how long this shift has been, but it seems to have like been distilled in some of this like MAGA extremism that not only is America the leader, in fact, America is independent and they're actually carrying everybody else.
Right.
And that
Right.
actually all of these other countries are just weighing America down, and America is doing charity work for all of these other countries and never getting anything in return for it, and the American people are suffering, and that disparagement and that economic disparity is coming from America giving things that should belong to America to these other countries as we're carrying them across the world stage. Does that sound right?
Yes. Yeah, I think you're saying exactly what that sentiment is.
Okay, I'm not crazy. Thank you.
No, you're not crazy at all. It's been pretty blatantly stated and implied numerous times by Trump, less so by Elon. I really see this stuff coming out of the Trump camp. It's the justification for American isolationism, and it is sort of a corrupted or sort of, a narcissist take on American exceptionalism. And there is no question, just sort of historically, objectively speaking, that America has been a trendsetter and tall on the world stage. But America has always been best when America has not stood on stage and called itself a self-made millionaire, because it never has been. And that's where you a figure like Trump really corrupts, muddies the waters, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not self-made, we are world-made, and that is a literal statement. We are the melting pot. That's a term that doesn't get used hardly ever anymore.
Yeah.
Grew up with that term. I grew up being culturally, taught that was what America is, and that's where America's strength comes from, is its diversity and variety. And this is messaging going back to the 70s. This isn't new. This is very, very central to our identity, but that identity has been challenged over these decades. Again, I keep coming back to the economic disparity of it and the emotional recoil of that on our psyche, the failure of Americans' exceptionalism. And our failure has been sort of being arranged behind the scenes in unobvious ways that have been very confusing for Americans.
When I was in school, we were taught, because I'm a Canadian, so we get taught differently. Our education systems are different, yada 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 yada, whatever. when we talk about Canadian identity, when I was in school, it was a little bit wishy-washy. Like, we weren't entirely sure what is it that made Canada Canada.
Mm.
And the main two things that we tended to lean towards, because we would be writing essays about this in class, and it was, one, we're not America, and two, we're more of like a salad bowl, where, like, instead of a melting pot where we're trying to get everybody to follow along with American culture, we are a culture made up of everything, where it's like we're not mushing all the vegetables together to make a paste, we are making a fruit salad where you can have cherry tomatoes and you can have lettuce and you can have blah 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 blah, blah croutons, whatever, and everybody can come in and everybody has a place, and ultimately all together creates a meal. And so it's interesting to hear the melting pot comparison as like a major benefit.
Oh yeah, no, that's interesting. That's an interesting point. The thing about both have features and bugs. Let's say that, right? Both models, and the reality is that we're both a mix of kind of both of these sentiments.
Mm-hmm.
America has long had separation and little Italy, little China, little Korea, Chinatown. You
Yeah.
can split up the cultures into these various places that do not mix and are not homogenous and make a point of not being that way. And then you have places where over generational time that fades, right? Because the second gen, third gen, fourth gen are not as solidly ethnic, let's say, as the first generation, getting off the boat people. And this is, pretty typical as progressive nations and cultures and all that. So I think we see a mix of these things. It's an interesting. Nobody's ever said it that way before, of the salad versus the melting pot analogy. I never thought of it that way before. So
Apparently, my essays in high school were far more impressive than any teacher ever thought.
that's funny. I think that's a funny observation. I think that's funny. Because I always thought of, because maybe you can clarify this for me, because I'm a stupid American, right? Looking up at Canada, and Canadians have always sort of let me know how Canada is sort of binary, because there's French Canada, if you're looking at a map right over on the right, and then there's British Canada on the left, and then this kind of mix that occurs between the two, but most of the French hang out over in Quebec. I don't know. It was loosely explained to me that way, as how
Yeah,
the
that's yeah. Quebec is specifically like French prominent. Call it
yeah,
that.
yeah,
And then you have New Brunswick, which has like a little bit of that very hefty mix, where you're, depending on where you are in New Brunswick, you'll get a little bit of one or the other, or like a hefty mix of the two. And then Ontario and West is pretty much English. And
right.
then if you're going the other way, you start speaking Newfie, which is just
Newfie.
Cajun. Canadian Cajun, I guess.
Newfie. Sounds like
Yeah, it literally, so it's just Newfoundland and Nova Scotia and Labrador and PEI, and they've all got like this very, like, you imagine like a southern twang with like this little bit of a slur to it. So you don't say there, you say dare. You don't say, right? So it's just like, I don't know if I can do it. So there's like this thing where you kind of roll your words together, and it's just kind of like slurs itself a little bit together. So you can understand it if you speak English, but your ears might need a little bit of Scottish bayou. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And
Oh,
yeah,
that's funny.
yeah, it's interesting. I would like to see more French. I would like to see like a higher French requirement in schools.
Really?
Um yeah, absolutely. I think being able more multilingual is a good idea. Period.
Sure.
So I'm for that.
And it would make sense in Canada to be bilingual French English rather than Spanish or Mexican English.
Yes. I mean, Portuguese is very popular depending on where you go in Canada.
Oh yeah?
So you would do French because it is our official language.
French
Um
official language of Canada?
Yep, we've got two. We are officially a bilingual country.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so like you have all schools that I know of. I don't know if there's like different rules in some other places, but French is you at least take 1 or 2 years of French.
Okay.
But it is just a class as part of your thing, and it's usually in junior high, usually grade 7, grade 8. And then you have a language requirement in high school, but it doesn't have to be French. So like depending on what your school offers, you can do French, German, Spanish. Some people choose Spanish because they want something a little bit different. Some people take French because they're like, oh, I kind of know what I'm doing. I actually had a very interesting thing because I had French all the way from kindergarten all the way through to high school because I just got caught up in an accidental program that wasn't actually I don't know, but I ended up with all the way I ended up with like grade 1 all the way through having French classes. Am I good at
Really?
French? Nope.
Yeah, can you speak French?
No. God no.
No?
God no. I've been practicing just out of spite because I feel like when America invades us it'd be really funny if we're all speaking French.
That's hilarious. Well, that's okay. That's very funny. Yeah.
I had a Maga show up and try to berate me and be like, "Oh, well, just speak Canadian. Like, just be Canadian. Talk about Canadian things." And I'm like, the interconnectivity between our countries is so beyond. But I thought it
Somebody
would be really. I was so disappointed because I thought it'd be really funny to do the stream in French.
somebody told you to speak Canadian?
Yes,
That's funny.
it was very very ridiculous. But
I
so
mean,
okay,
so
if
sometimes I just wonder if anyway, yeah,
why aren't
that's
you
all.
speaking American?
Why
There
are you not
is
Canadian?
there's so many like oddball things between our countries. And what do you think's gonna happen? Do you what with the trade war? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, okay. So right now, as I understand it, Trump threatened tariffs. Canada actually implemented them. And that's interesting. And I'm not upset with Canada about that. I'm not saying that in some snarky way. I just think it's interesting.
Yeah.
Sort of, sort of, it's going to play out in a very PR-y kind of way, I think, more so than in a real way.
Okay.
By this, I mean,
Interesting.
What Trump has been doing, okay, I don't mean to downplay or make less of what they're actually doing. They're firing wholesale thousands and thousands of government employees right now with no expectation of even fair treatment. In an unprecedented move, right? Musk and the Doge guys are in there actually doing that. Real emails, real communications, real firings are really happening. Trump has blustered his way into an awful lot of putting everybody in a very unstable, uncertain place, and is destroying America's reputation on the international stage. He's actively doing that
Yeah.
by creating all the uncertainty and insulting language and nonsense that he's doing. So I don't say anything about the future in an effort to downplay what's happening, but I also don't want to say that he's doing more than what he's doing right now. Tough talk on the part of the president, American president, is doing something. It doesn't mean nothing.
Yeah.
That being said, pretty much 70% of what this guy says, he doesn't follow through on.
Yeah.
Right? It's just not knowing what 30% he is going to follow through on that makes everybody crazy, right?
Right.
That on purpose. And that's cult leader 101 stuff. He does it to his cult. He does it to the rest of the world. It's just what he does. It's Trump's way of navigating the world, is
You're
create.
actually saying something that a lot of our politicians have been talking about, and saying that Trump is purposefully trying to destabilize the opposing party, meaning he's trying to keep other countries on the back foot in their decision making about what they're going to do, because we don't know what Trump is and is not going to do.
Exactly. And the main reason why this is so destructive is not
Order
because
the deal.
Trump will or won't do in the next month or two. The reason this is so destructive is Trump has created a situation now where no country can trust a treaty or agreement that they make with America. That's the lasting damage that's occurring starting now.
Yeah.
Because of what Trump and his entire administration is doing. And they're doing it on purpose. And they're not just doing it to keep people on their back feet. There are conflicting factions within the Trump world. Yes. It's not a unified body of people.
Trump does that to his own people, keeping them on the back foot about who he's favoring. That's why you're seeing this definitely not fight between Marco Rubio and Elon Musk right now.
Yep,
it's the same thing.
That's right. And the formula is create unrest, stand back, and what's the word? Be the referee, right? Adjudicate.
It's like a harem.
That's
let
one.
Let the harem fight while the king does whatever he's doing.
This tactic is used in harems. Yes, it's used in cults. It's used in business. It's used by Keith Raniere and NXIVM. It's not divide and conquer. It's you have a group of people around you who you need, but you don't want them uniting against you. So you keep them anxious about each other.
Yeah.
And then you take the side that best suits you in the moment, that for your advantage, and you just keep playing these people against each other, or countries against each other, or against you, right, etc. And Trump is only half good at this kind of work.
Yes.
He's very incompetent as a person. He's very incompetent as a businessman, and he's completely out of his depth in politics. He has no concept of what he's doing in any sort of long-term way. So you got to dial back the thinking to immediate needs. That's how Trump is operating.
Instant gratification.
That's right. Instant gratification. What's going to feed his narcissistic supply? What's going to give him what feels good? Zelensky does not feed his narcissistic supply.
No.
Putin does.
Yes.
That's why you see him act the way he does towards Putin. He's not subservient to Putin. He does not imagine that Putin is more powerful than him or is a better person than him, but he takes cues from Putin as to how to act because he wants to be in Putin's position of having that kind of authority and that kind of admiration and that kind of power of the military respecting you and that kind of thing. That's how he looks at those people, and that's why he acts the way he does towards them and favors them.
Out of curiosity, then, why do you think Trump responds to Macron, the Prime Minister of France, the way he does? Because the Prime Minister of France just dog-walked him. Completely dog-walked him.
There are people in the international community who are better at dealing with narcissists than others. Zelensky was correctly criticized and for not doing or not acting certain ways in his meeting in the White House, that it didn't have to go the way that it went. And that's not victim blaming. I'm not saying it's all on Zelensky. He was set up. Don't mishear what I'm saying. But he could have dealt with it differently. And had he dealt with it slightly differently, it could have had a different outcome. The British Prime Minister, Starmer, did a bang up job of sort of dealing with Trump in a way that was going to get him the outcome that he wanted, even if he had to eat some shit to do it, right? Mm-hmm. You shouldn't have to eat a lot of shit, but being a politician is eating some shit. That is a skill you have to have. Yeah. And you have to be able to have a smile on your face when you're doing it.
You got to make it look like you're not when you are.
Exactly. And you got to understand who you're dealing with. And politics is all about that. Mm. And Zelensky is not a great politician. He's a perfectly adequate leader for his country in an incredibly trying time.
Yes. Yeah.
Not say he's a great politician. He's not, and he's never.
Yeah, those are different. They're different, completely different skill sets. Leading a country during wartime versus leading a country during peacetime are incredibly different things. And not every politician is the best at every single thing.
Exactly.
There's a reason why we're swapping out Trudeau for Carney. Right? Yeah. There's a reason why Trudeau wasn't doing well, because Trudeau was not communicating very well the benefits of what his administration was doing in the midst of the unrest. However, during times of crisis, Trudeau is fantastic. Why do you think he spiked in the polls as soon as these tariffs were coming through? He's amazing at that. He's amazing at talking to the Canadian people when it comes to something that is so direct. But in this time of just general civil uncertainty, it doesn't help that his administration was doing things that were unpopular but necessary. And so that's just a hard conversation to pull off regardless.
Exactly. And again, in times of economic unrest and uncertainty, that's the time that is the hardest to communicate to your people, because that's when they're most stressed. Yeah. You know. And
you're telling them that, all right, listen, I know you're stressed. I know you're having a really hard time with this, but I'm cutting this deal over here that's going to, the carbon tax that's going to screw you. Here's the thing about the carbon tax. It's been working. It's been doing exactly as it's intended. Is it popular? No. But this is also assuming that you're even dealing with honest agents in the first place, let alone people trying to purposefully undermine what you're trying to do.
Well, yeah, exactly. So the point being that Macron is a seasoned politician.
I think Macron did a better job than the UK Prime Minister, for sure.
Did a decent job with that. Yeah. There are people who, and that's the thing, is that you can't pretend to manage the president of the United States. You know what I mean? There is no one person on this planet who has more power, more raw, naked power than the president of the United States. So you gotta be really, really good just to deal with that. Then you add Trump on top of that.
Yeah, I think Griffin in the chat makes a really good point. Zelensky's reactions were too human.
Well, exactly. There's a game that you have to play, and there's a way you have to play it. And
Zelensky reacted to Trump the way every normal person would react to talking to Trump in a room.
Well, exactly. And I mean, doesn't this fall back to George R. R. Martin, right? Game of Thrones. You're going to play it. There's only two ways, right? You're either going to win or you're going to die. And that's kind of how you have to approach it when you're at that level. There is no higher level of politics to get involved in for humans, right? Like that is the peak. That's it. That's the top. The people either are competent and know what they're doing and do it right, or they fuck it up. And if they fuck it up, all of us end up feeling the consequences of that. And there's been a lot of people fucking up a lot of stuff for quite a while now to land us where we're at,
I think there's something to be said, too, that we don't necessarily know what Zelensky was expecting to walk into.
Well, for sure. But he should have known. And that's the thing. There's no reason.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's like, I don't know. Because I think a lot of people... I mean, hindsight's 20/20, and I think between being an American and being a Canadian that's been dealing with Trump more directly, I guess, than maybe Ukraine feels like they would be on the front lines necessarily, is like, there's 30% of what Trump's actually going to do. So did Zelensky have that mindset going in that, yeah, he's saying this stuff, but he's not gonna do this thing? And it's like, and there he is doing the thing.
No, you have to
assume. You have to take all of it seriously. That's what I like that Canada's doing. We are like, as much as we're like, he's probably not going to follow through with this, but we are going to decide what we are going to follow through on, and that grants Canadians a degree of unity and certainty, even if we understand that it's going to suck.
That's right.
At least it's understood.
If you're going to play Trump, then you're going to have to play his game. You can't, in his position where he's at right now, when somebody's president, you got to play their game. Sure. When he was candidate Trump, maybe it was a different conversation, right? But when he's sitting in the office, you got to, if you want to get what you want out of that relationship, he has to be manipulated, and Trump is very, very manipulatable.
Oh yeah, Macron and Trudeau both talk to Trump like he's 3. One of the reasons why Trudeau is decent at dealing with Trump is because he was like a teacher. He was a drama teacher. As his career job. So like he talks to him like he's just like, "Hey buddy, how you doing? How you feeling? You need a crayon?" But you got to make sure that he doesn't know you're treating him that way.
That's the tricky part.
Yeah.
Because the thing that the thing that these people chase, the cult leaders, right? Mm-hmm. The thing that they chase after is respect.
Yes.
Because almost uniformly, almost every single one of them come from a place where they were not only not respected, but they were so violently disrespected that it turned them into what they are. Mm-hmm. It's a way of thinking about it, right? I mean, not a lot of people want to think about cult leaders or authoritarians as victims, but very, very few of them were actually born that way. You know, people get turned into these things, and and Trump's no exception to that. So you have to give them that respect and feed them their narcissistic supply, but you got to be good enough at it to convince them that you mean it.
Yeah, I think that's really what we saw with Macron. Macron was physically dominating. Trudeau does the same thing. He doesn't lean into whatever Trump is doing. He makes Trump go to him. And Trump respects that to some degree. And so because he respects that and understands that the people respect those leaders, he wants that for himself, which is why he looks like a bumbling idiot beside the UK Prime Minister, which is why he looks like a bumbling idiot beside, and why he needs, when he was dealing with Zelensky, why he needed a gang behind him, because he would have looked ridiculous if JD Vance wasn't jumping in there fucking poking him with a stick. You know what I mean?
Well, JD's actually pretty smart there, right? Because he saw an opportunity to advance his own position with Trump.
Yep.
And that's what everybody in that room who has any degree of savvy when it comes to understanding who and what Trump is, that's what the moments and opportunities they're looking for.
As Marco Rubio just sinks into the couch. It's like, I actually don't want any part of this.
Marco Rubio is such a spineless worm. There's what was I going to say? Is
JD Vance.
Yeah.
Taking advantage of.
There's those opportunities to advance, right? You got to realize that that's what you're looking at. If you think about Trump and the decisions that he makes and the way he lives his life as analogous to a mob boss, you'll be so much more able to predict what he's about and how his attitude about his job is. You know, it's not the fact that other people have power that he respects. It's that they're willing to use it in very obvious and self-serving ways that he respects. You know?
I think it's a misunderstanding or a misapplication that Trump has about what makes somebody respect you and what makes you deserving of respect. So,
well, yeah, it's a sort of Nietzschean leadership morality thing.
Yeah.
You know, because there's a need. I don't know all about this, but I do like talking about it because I think it's kind of interesting, and it feeds into the cult leader thing. is Nietzsche proposes two, if I understand it right, two sets of, moral systems or morality, and the leadership or the aristocracy class or the strongman morality doesn't allow for weakness. It's
Right.
it's a competition based morality where the strong survive and the weak die.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to die, then you better be strong. And that's period, end of story. And that morality dominates Trump's thinking. That's not the morality of the common man.
And it's the monopoly effect, right? It's these people who got a head start that think they're stronger than everybody else when actually what they were given was an advantage.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Well,
because they're given an advantage in a situation
yeah,
where growing up in that situation was like growing up in a monster factory. Growing up in a competition-based household where your siblings are your rivals for privilege and power in the family structure. And I mean these terms literally, I don't mean them in some figurative sense, is what makes people like Donald into people like Donald. That's not it. They're not growing up in a loving home where love and respect and compassion are the pinnacle of what the family is about. The family is about cutthroat power and competition.
Yeah.
You raise kids in an environment like that, you get a Trump.
Yeah, what were you expecting?
Exactly.
That's probably a good place to cut it. We have been live for an hour, but
okay, cool.
We can come back if you're interested in continuing the conversation. I'll just put the thing up, and then we'll be right back in just like a minute or two. Does that sound good to you?
Sure, we can do that.
Fantastic. All right. We will see you guys momentarily.